everyone. This is Good Morning Transfers. We've got just 2 weeks to go until transfer deadline day. Teams are going to have to act fast if they're to get their business done. Maybe they should take a leaf out of Manchester City's book. They're not messing around. They could sign 3 players this week. Ruben Amorim describes his Manchester United side as the worst team maybe in the history of Manchester United. Is he right? More woe for Ange Postecoglou, another defeat and another injury issue. Are any signings imminent? Morning to Molly Stevens and Manny Brown. Not just those two, of course, as well. Very good morning to Flex and to Kweku Afari as well. And we've got plenty to discuss this morning. We're going to start with Manchester City because they could bring in 3 players this week. They've had long-term targets, Omar Marmoush and the 2 centre-backs, Abdulkadir Husanov and Vitor Heisz. Marmoush said farewell to Eintracht Frankfurt on Friday night. A verbal agreement has been reached with Frankfurt to sign Marmoush. He wasn't part of the squad that faced Dortmund on Friday night, and he is expected to fly into the country this week to complete the move. Someone that we've been talking about quite a lot already this January. They're desperate to get him in Manchester City. It sounds like it's close now, but they scored 6 against Ipswich. They don't need him, do they, Flex?
They're back now. You know, Haaland 9-year deal, and they're back in the goals. But this is a player who's having a fantastic season, not just with scoring goals but creating them as well. And I think he can give Manchester City a much-needed boost, and it shows just the intent and the standards of Manchester City. This is the first time we've seen them sort of in the January transfer window spend this much money. This is the first time we've, of course, seen them have this sort of bad form in the league, of course. So they're straight in there to address these problems. Pep Guardiola has spoken so much about how he's tried to find solutions within the squad. He's spoken about the summer, about potentially getting it wrong. He said they probably should have went for it then and they didn't. He thought they can get through it with the injuries that they proceeded to have. And he's someone who's going to offer a fresh dynamic, a fresh look. Julian Alvarez left to go to Atletico Madrid, wasn't necessarily replaced. And then a lot of the top players, you know, Phil Foden now, in his last 6 games has been fantastic, but the previous 11, not so much. So there was a lot of sort of pressure on Erling Haaland, who always scores goals, but he was probably the only outlet. Doku, not at the required level where he's been. Savinho struggling at times. Jack Grealish struggling at times. So Omar Marmoush is a very, very welcome addition to this City side.
And we have talked about this before, about, you know, how he could fit in, but it is quite relevant. Now he's coming in, almost certainly. He plays anywhere across the front line, doesn't he? He can play as a number 10 as well. But he's played the majority of his career as centre-forward. He's not going to be centre-forward in this team. So when you look at the 11 that started against Ipswich, where's he most likely to slot in?
So, like Flex touched on, I think he's a long-term replacement for Julian Alvarez. Man City recouped a massive fee for him. They kind of had to let him go as a player who's pushing for first-team football. At Eintracht Frankfurt, he's played as a centre-forward, but I see him fitting in terms of playing off of Erling Haaland. Can play on the left-hand side, played 3 games there this season, but predominantly he's a centre-forward. For Man City, it's about getting back to goals by committee. We saw that against Ipswich. The best iteration of City is when a lot of players contribute in terms of goals. We know Erling Haaland scores goals in his sleep. He scored 17 league goals this season in a bad season for him. But for me, I see Marmoush slotting in just in behind Haaland. If that means moving De Bruyne further back, then I think they'll do that. Obviously, Foden plays on the right-hand side. We saw Doku play on the left-hand side. Like I say, Marmoush can play on the left, but I see him playing just in behind Erling Haaland and supplementing that squad in terms of goals.
Could he maybe be an option on the left? I mean, you know, Foden's scoring goals now, isn't he? De Bruyne looks like he's getting back to his form. You want to have all 3 of them in the side, don't you? So possibly you could put them on one of the flanks?
I think any attacker who comes to Manchester City, bar someone like Erling Haaland, who was a straight 9, they have to arrive at Manchester City with some expectation that they're going to have to adapt. They're going to have to do things in their career and have certain demands on them placed upon them that they haven't necessarily had. Because this is the Pep Guardiola side. He likes his wingers to play in a certain way a lot of the time. He likes players to play in different positions. Just look at the back four. Look at what's going on with the centre halves and the different positions they have to take up on the pitch. And I think we haven't actually spoke about Omar Marmoush himself having to adapt his game. Yes, of course, at Eintracht Frankfurt, he's having a fantastic season. He's the main guy. He's scoring all the goals. He's getting all the assists. Like you said, Matt, coming into this Manchester City side, there's going to be a need for him at times on the left. There's going to be a need for times for him on the right. There's going to be a need for times just off the front. They might even ask him to play left 8 because there's something else has changed and Bernardo Silva's not in there, or Kevin De Bruyne. There's so many different facets to a Pep Guardiola side that this is the challenge of playing for this manager. You have to understand that you're going to be asked to have different parts of your game added, and you're going to have to work on those. So Omar Marmoush also has to understand that. He has to know that I can't just replicate what I've done at Eintracht Frankfurt. This is a completely different system, and there's going to be demands placed upon him as well.
Needs to score goals. He scored 15 goals in the league for Frankfurt this season. Man City never really replaced the goals they lost with Raheem Sterling, who did contribute massively and played in different positions along that front line.
Exactly.
He needs to be multifaceted. He needs to be versatile. He needs to be able to slot into different positions. And only Harry Kane scored more goals than him in the Bundesliga, which shows you that his end product is there. 10 assists as well. He needs to score goals for this City team. That's what I think he'll do.
Well, Omar Marmoush, we are hearing, will be flying in early this week to complete his move to Manchester City. How about the other two? Well, defender Abdulkadir Kusanov had his medical on Friday ahead of his transfer from Lens, which is worth around £33.5 million plus bonuses. Vitor Heisz is also in the country ahead of his move from Palmeiras, which is worth £29.4 million. Two centre-backs coming in, two young centre-backs. When you look at what they've got, they're not exactly short on centre-backs because they often use centre-backs as a left-back or even a right-back, Manchester City. What does it mean for the centre-backs that are in situ? What's these two come in? They're going to be absolutely stacked, aren't they?
I think the main thing to concentrate on is the age profile. They are very young players, so this signifies a rebuild. This is a long-term rebuild project. And if you look at Kusanov, for example, Kev Hatchard talked about how he's not the finished product yet. There's still development to do, but Man City are stacked in that position. Like you said, Matt, they've got Ruben Diaz, Vardiol, Akanji, Ake, Stones. So many players.
Can they keep them all?
I don't think they can. And then in the summer, we'll have to see what outgoings look like for Manchester City. But a lot of these players do get injured as well. If you think about the time that Ruben Diaz has missed, think about the time that John Stones has missed as well. Akanji's missed time this season through injury. And so we know Pep Guardiola likes to strengthen from the back. He spent a lot of money on centre-backs during his time as Man City manager. But in terms of keeping players happy, you know there's going to have to be outgoings, if not in January, in the summer, to be able to facilitate everybody into this squad.
Right, in terms of outgoings, AC Milan are expected to make Manchester City a loan offer for Kyle Walker. That is according to Sky Italy. It's thought it will be a 6-month loan offer with an option to buy permanently. Interesting stuff, this, because we first mentioned the Walker news, well, seems like a while ago now, and nothing's really happened. But we have heard that AC Milan's interest in Marcus Rashford is cooling. So as a result of that, because they can only sign one English player, do you expect potentially this Walker move to AC Milan to accelerate rapidly in the next few days?
Yeah, it certainly feels that way, doesn't it? At this stage, there has been reports in the media that, you know, from the player side, there's been some negotiations there and some agreements there, but obviously nothing concrete. And Zlatan has been talking as well and talking up the transfer as well. So I think for Kyle Walker, look, hasn't played for Manchester City since, of course, he said he didn't want to be part of the plans. He wanted a new challenge. He wanted to move. And I think this deal will start to pick up, especially that it's been a bit of a stagnation period in this last week or so. Now that the dominoes are beginning to fall and things are starting to fall in place, I think Kyle Walker to just get some minutes, to get a fresh perspective, a new set of surroundings. He's such a highly decorated footballer here in this country. And what he's done for England as well, he's been a fantastic player. And you can see a decline in him. You've seen that, I think, since the Euros. And whether that's due to a little bit of instability of wanting a new challenge and various other situations, maybe. But he's still a fantastic player, and actually in the continent, I think he did really well.
Yeah, OK. Manchester City could be busy with incomings and outgoings this week. You never know. Right, let's get to one of our regular features then, and it is our one to watch in terms of transfers this window. That player today is Lloyd Kelly of Newcastle. Juventus, Kwaku, potentially interested in the Newcastle defender Lloyd Kelly. What can you tell us?
You're potentially swapping the black and white stripes of Newcastle to the black and white stripes of Juventus. Juventus are interested in signing Newcastle defender Lloyd Kelly. If you think back to the summer, Lloyd Kelly joined Newcastle on a free transfer, previously played for Bournemouth. He's a player that, because of the return of fitness of Sven Botman, because of the shift of Dan Burn from left back to centre back, his game time's been limited this season. He's only started 4 league games for Newcastle. Newcastle aren't looking to sell, though. If you think back to the summer, Newcastle were very, very keen on bringing in another centre-back to reinforce those options. Couldn't get the Mark Guehi deal over the line. Lloyd Kelly's a very, very good player. There's been interest not just from Juventus, but also from teams in Turkey as well. So he's a player of interest to a number of clubs on the continent. It will take a big bid to really shift Newcastle's intentions in terms of this player. But if you think about Newcastle's tricky situation when it comes to PSR, the fact that he joined on a free and they could potentially recoup a fee for a player within 6 months that's not really in their first team plans would be a huge move for Newcastle. But like I say, it's going to take a huge bid to move him from Newcastle this window.
As you say, though, we have seen that they have been willing to sell players for PSR reasons. We've seen that in the summer as well. Right, the problems continue to mount for Tottenham and for Ange Postecoglou. Another defeat and yet more injuries to contend with. Dominic Solanke missed the defeat to Everton. Let's hear from Postecoglou, who after the game had this to say on potential signings.
I have no issue with the way the club's going about it. They're working hard and trying to find solutions for us. These players need help for sure. Hopefully over the next sort of 10 days we find a solution for it.
Are you confident you will get those solutions then in the next week or so?
It's hard to say. I mean, it's like I said, it's really tricky. We're not the only ones, in the market for players, but like I said, the club's working hard to try and find a solution for it.
Spurs just need a win at the moment, don't they? We are hearing that Spurs' number one priority is to sign an attacker. They were interested in Randall Kolo Muani. That's obviously not going to happen because he's going to end up going to Juventus, we think. Yesterday, though, was that not more evidence that scoring goals isn't the problem?
Yeah. Where do you begin, though, Matt? They've got a lot of problems. And trust me, I know what a lot of problems looks like.
We'll get onto your lot. Don't you worry about that.
Deep breath. I'm not trying to throw shade here. Take it from me. I'm in the same situation. But there's a multitude of problems. There is. Of course, injuries. You look at how decimated Spurs are, and you look at the senior pros who would have been in the starting 11 that are out. So that alone, you have to balance just how much you go on to spend.
But the injuries are at the back mostly, aren't they? Surely those are the holes that you fill first.
Absolutely. You would think so. Young Archie Gray having to play centre-half and Disson doing the best he can is a big problem. They still need a central midfielder, in my eyes, like a number 6. They've needed that position for a long time. Yes, invested heavily in the top end of the pitch in Dominic Solanke. He has an injury which doesn't help at all. So they, between all the positions from the top end to the bottom of the pitch, they could do with reinforcements. But you've got Van der Ven coming back not too long. You've got Romero coming back. They did buy Dragusin to play in these times when you need him, and that's not going to plan as well. So you're questioning the recruitment there as well. I just think it's a really difficult position for Ange Postecoglou because of also the way he wants to play, the demands he puts on his team, and he's not willing to change anything. So they do need players. They definitely need defenders. I'd definitely start there. But also, Matt, midfield is a problem. The top end of the pitch is a problem. Not enough quality.
Do you agree with that? It's not just defence. Central midfield could do with beefing up a little bit?
Definitely. Because when a team concedes a lot of goals, automatically you point to the centre-backs. But it's the lack of protection in front of them. Spurs have been crying out for a number 6, somebody who can maybe take the place of Basuma, somebody who can play alongside Sarr. They lack that solidity in the middle of the park, and they conceded 35 league goals in 22 games. And that tells you about their problems, because they have no issues on the other end of the pitch. They've scored the second most goals in the division behind Liverpool. The reason why Spurs are in the bottom half of the table after 22 games is because defensively they're struggling, and part of that defensive issue is the people in front of those defenders, and that midfield position has been an issue for a couple of windows for Spurs that they haven't addressed.
Yeah. I want to get Molly and Manny's thoughts on it. The problem, Molly, is that if Dominic Solanke is perhaps more injured or has a worse injury than hoped initially, might that throw a spanner in the works? Might they then have to look at a number 9 first?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I think you're spot on. You know, we've talked about their need for a forward. Brennan Johnson out now as well. Dominic Solanke too, just adding to Ange Postecoglou's injury woes. They are now missing 11 players, Manny. It is quite unbelievable. Just look at some of the names there. I mean, as Fleck said, Mickey van de Ven looks to be coming back soon, which is a positive. Romero potentially as well. But to lose Dominic Solanke and Brennan Johnson, we're unsure of how long for. But does that exacerbate Ange Postecoglou's need for a striker, do you think?
It's a huge miss to have Dominic Solanke out. He's been one of the people scoring goals for them. Brennan Johnson's come a long way as well, looking very good. But I think the problem for them is they can't catch a break. So for a moment, if you'd asked me before, I'd say defender, definitely. But we've seen some of those could be coming back soon. I feel for Archie Gray, I thought he'd come in and play in midfield. He's comfortable on the ball. When he's pressed, he's press-proven pretty much. So I think if we're thinking about it, attacker probably is the main thing for them now. But also watching that game yesterday, defence is really important. So where do they go from here? Where do they start? And like Fleck said as well, midfield.
Yeah, absolutely. As for a number 9, is there anyone in particular that you'd have in mind, Manny, that could fill that role for Ange Postecoglou?
To be honest, we've talked about Evan Ferguson. Could he come into that role? Will it be too big of boots to fill? Solanke's just out. But I think it's a hard one. Strikers are a hard market right now. We could see Arsenal having similar problems with looking for a striker. So I don't know, it's very tough.
Yeah, and with Randall Kolo Muani off the market now, looking like he's going to Juventus, it does really press that need for a striker. That said, centre-back has been a problem. Injuries galore, as we've just seen, for Ange Postecoglou and Tottenham. A pacey centre-back, Matt, you'd think would be the priority, given the way that Ange Postecoglou wants to play out from the back. But we'll wait and see. It looks like a lot of business needs to be done for Tottenham Hotspur with their increasing injury list.
Yeah, it does. I think overall conclusion, they need a lot at the moment. Coming up, as he mentioned there, he does understand what position Spurs are in, does old Flex. We've got some therapy for you, mate, coming up. We're going to discuss...
I don't think that's what you'll...
It might be the opposite, actually. We're going to discuss Manchester United. Is this really the worst team in the club's history? That's what the manager says. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. This is your transfer update. AC Milan are cooling their interest in the Manchester United forward Marcus Rashford. That's according to Sky in Italy. Sky Italy are also reporting that Milan are exploring a potential deal for Chelsea's João Felix. Matisse Tell wants to stay and fight for his place in the Bayern Munich team and is unwilling to leave after Chelsea made contact for the forward. West Ham United will consider suitable options or offers even for the winger Luis Guillem amid concrete interest from Saudi Arabia. Staying with West Ham, and the forward Maxwell Cornet is in Italy for a medical with Genoa after agreeing a loan until the end of the season. Brighton and Hove Albion are in advanced talks with Feyenoord over a sale of Jakub Moder. And Wolves are in talks to sign the Vitória SC midfielder Manu Silva. They have submitted a bid in the region of £10 million.
Deep breath. Okay, it's time to talk Manchester United. And Ruben Amorim described this Manchester United squad as possibly the worst Man United squad in history. I don't know why you guys are all smiling. It's not funny.
It's just been interesting seeing how charged you've been coming into work today.
Yeah,
I can't wait for this segment.
It's not been great. And to be honest with you, that assessment of where Manchester United currently are, in all seriousness, is valid. It is valid. You know, Manchester United, look where they are in the Premier League. You look at the league. You look at how the performances have been. You look at the lack of consistency, the lack of quality, the lack of positive recruitment. Is he just stating the fact, Manny?
I think so. And I can't remember a time when Manchester United have lost that many games at Old Trafford and it's looked that easy to come to Old Trafford, not just win, but dominate a game. It doesn't look like you're on the front foot ever. Even Southampton came and they looked for 75 minutes like they could have gotten a result. Unfortunately for them, at the end, they crumbled. But I think you look really weak, and I don't think he's wrong at all.
Kwaku, for you, look, there's Ruben Amorim said, you guys like the headlines, you know, basically hear ones for you. Do you think that's to give a little bit of a shock factor to try and wake the players up, or do you think it's a dangerous line in terms of actually publicly stating that, you know, he basically thinks that this is the worst Man United team has been in history?
He's been very transparent ever since he walked through the door at Old Trafford. And I think that's what's been really refreshing about Ruben Amorim. He says it's going to take a long time. Think about 2 or 3 years ago when Rangnick took over as interim boss. He said this is going to require open heart surgery. He's just echoing those sentiments. And this is a Manchester United team that, in the big games against your biggest rivals, if you look at the game against Manchester City away from home, game against Arsenal, game against Liverpool, Manchester United turned up. But in the games against Southampton, Bournemouth, Brighton, those games where Manchester United need to assert their dominance, they've struggled. And I think Amorim's just being completely honest. And it's a shock to hear because it's such strong words, but I can understand why he is making it clear to everybody that this is a long-term project. And I do think he's going to be here for the long term, but there is a lot of work to do with this Manchester United squad.
There is an absolutely mammoth task to do at Manchester United.
Flex.
I know. Well,
Sorry.
it's going to take a while. We do know that AC Milan have called their interest in Marcus Rashford as it stands, potentially with them looking forward to take Kyle Walker. Borussia Dortmund have been mentioned for Marcus Rashford. Let's start talking about recruitment, Molly, because if Manchester United are going to get out of this mess or begin to unpack what's happened, it's got to start with recruitment for both ins and out. Marcus Rashford with Dortmund interest.
Yeah, I actually fancy Borussia Dortmund for Marcus Rashford. I think they've done a good job in looking after Jadon Sancho, quite frankly, after a similar situation when it comes to falling out with the hierarchy at Manchester United. They've put an arm around him and certainly looked after him to make sure he can flourish at the club. Daniel Marlin, his exit to Aston Villa frees up a space there for Marcus Rashford. I think for me, though, Marcus Rashford just has to play football. Game time is imperative for any footballer, and clearly he needs it, whether that be at Borussia Dortmund or at another club. He clearly wants to impress the England manager, Thomas Tuchel, and get back into the fold there with the World Cup just 18 months away. It's damaging for a player to not play football for this long, and given that he hasn't played now since December in that Europa League game against Pilsen, that's a long time without any football. He needs some confidence, and I think Borussia Dortmund could be the place for him there. That said, if Manchester United do keep hold of him, I think Ruben Amorim has to factor him into his plans.
Yeah,
has to.
You can't have a player like Marcus Rashford. who hasn't secured a move potentially at the end of this window, sitting there until the lights of August. So also moving on to another player, Manchester United's Alejandro Garnacho is under a lot of consideration from your club, Kwaku. Yeah. Chelsea, there's been talks there, or some interest there. There's been interest from Napoli as well. No formal bids or anything like that, but in terms of Chelsea potentially having a look at Alejandro Garnacho, can you see why? Do you need a player like that?
Chelsea have been relatively quiet in this transfer window. If we talk about it from a Manchester United point of view and an Alejandro Garnacho point of view, I always say the wing-backs are full-backs that want more or wingers that need less. Unfortunately, Garnacho doesn't fall into any of those categories. Garnacho is a proper winger. And unfortunately for him, you look at how Amorim sets up his sides, especially at Sporting Lisbon, doesn't play with traditional wingers. He plays with those narrow number 10s behind the striker and plays with wing-backs. I don't think Garnacho is a wing-back. And he's a man that's played a lot of football. Let's remember, he's only 20 years old. Last year as a teenager was very, very imperative and integral to what Manchester United did. A player that scored some important goals, some big goals for the football club. So I think the criticism for him or towards him this season has been unfair because he has had to do a lot, and especially at such a young age. In terms of Chelsea being interested in Garnacho, I don't know if there's too much legs in that story because Chelsea are well stocked in those areas. Think about the players coming in the summer as well for Chelsea. Estevao, a player that's very, very highly rated. I don't think Garnacho would necessarily suit what Maresca's looking to do at Chelsea, but I think the issue and the question surrounding Alejandro Garnacho is where does he fit into Ruben Amorim's starting 11?
Yeah, and I'll just say on that, I do think he is still a long-term prospect for Manchester United. It's clearly about developing the player away from there at the moment. But that said, I get actually quite conflicting messages from Ruben Amorim on that part because he was on the bench, yes, against Brighton, but before that he started the 2 previous games. So I'm not sure if it's nailed on that he'll definitely leave Old Trafford, but he clearly is, I think, a long-term prospect, given he is an academy player and could really flourish as a player. He's a great player at the end of the day, but he just needs to grow in confidence and fit into a style of play.
I think it's all about replacements. And another player who could be on his way out of Manchester United. The talks are ongoing between Real Betis and Manchester United over the loan signing of Anthony. It's understood discussions are over a straight loan. Manny, obviously, Anthony has not had the best of times at Manchester United, coming for a huge price tag. 1 goal this year against Barnsley in the Carabao Cup.
It's a strange one for me because when you look at Anthony and what he was about, everything he was about at Ajax, it was confidence, flair, like almost that sort of arrogance that a football player and a winger needs, especially in that position. But when he's come to Manchester United, I always do say it is one of the heaviest shirts in football to come on and take that mantle and try and be that player who's going to make the difference. So obviously it's been a big shame for him. He showed a bit of a spark in the earlier games, but he's failed to carry that on. And with the scrutiny that he gets consistently put under, it's difficult for him. So I think a loan move could be good to maybe try and reignite his Manchester United career.
Well, there you have it. Loads of positivity around Manchester United. They will fix things. We will be back. It's been a good window so far. Hang on in there, Matt.
Yeah. Positivity, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. Right, well done, Flex. Still to come. We'll have a look at these stories making the back pages. Could a Chelsea defender be set to leave? Stay tuned. to Good Morning Transfers. Now, in a few minutes, we'll be taking a look at the papers and we'll discuss Arsenal. Before that, though, former Tottenham striker Jermain Defoe sent us this video with his players to keep an eye on.
2025. These are my 3 players to watch out for. I think the first one is a player that I coached at Tottenham for 2 years in the academy. I'll probably go as far as saying he's probably one of the best players at his age I've seen in the country. And actually, I remember we played a game last year against Chelsea. And his performance was unbelievable. It was a standout performance. It was probably his best performance of the season in a big game. We ended up winning 3-2, was 2-0 down. It was a masterclass. And the player's name is Tyrese Hall. He's someone who I believe is a Premier League footballer. And that's a big statement, but he's someone who, when I first saw him, I thought, you know what? I believe, God willing, that he's someone that can go on and play at the top level. An unbelievable footballer, so much potential. And he reminds me a little bit, technically, how he is, so silky. Again, another big statement of that Luka Modric sort of vibe and Joe Cole. Phenomenal talent. Kieran McGann, another one. Kieran was at Tottenham. Again, I coached Kieran. And then he had a decision to make whether to stay at Tottenham. He had a few offers and that, and he's actually at QPR now, doing well, playing football, which is always important for young players. Again, someone who always trained well, huge potential, technically gifted, and these players are young, but he was someone who I believe that can go on and sky's the limit, go on and hopefully, play at some level, and he's doing that now. There's another one, Callum Olosesi. He's been on the bench a few times this season for Tottenham. Another young player. Can play as a holding midfielder, as a 6, plays as 8, plays as 10. Still developing, but great potential. And obviously people know about Mikey Moore. So I don't even need to mention Mikey because Mikey's made a few appearances in the Premier League, so people know about Mikey Moore. But for you that don't know, Kieran, Tyrese and Callum. I think they're the 3 players who really stood out for me at Tottenham. And yeah, like I said, God willing, hopefully they go on to have unbelievable careers because the potential is there.
Right, good intel from Jermain. Remember those 3 names for the future. We're now going to go through a couple of stories in this morning's newspapers that have caught our eye. First of all, The Sun are reporting that Chelsea want a stunning £40 million for the centre-half Trevor Chalobah after recalling him from his Crystal Palace loan. What are your club up to here? They bring Chalobah back. Now you're hearing he might not get much game time and he might be for sale.
Great question. It's an interesting situation, and you do feel for the player in the situation. He finally found a home at Crystal Palace, formed a formidable back line with Lacroix and Mark Guehi, and Palace were finding some form as well. Recalled because Chelsea do have shortages when it comes to a centre-back position. But if you think about how Chalobah was dealt with in the summer in terms of he had the squad number taken away from him whilst he was still at the football club. He had to train away from the first team, was very cordial throughout the whole process and still was dedicated to the football club, trained well, according to reports. And now Chelsea recalled him, and I can't really foresee him playing much football under Enzo Maresca. Maresca had the chance to look at him in the summer and didn't fancy him. I understand that he's a Chelsea player, so Chelsea have all the right to recall him and use him as they like. But for a player like Trevor Chalobah, he needs to play football. He's 25 years old. He needs to play regular football. He's played 12 league games this season for Crystal Palace. And it reminds me, if you take your mind back to the 16-17 season, Chelsea did a very similar thing with Nathan Ake. Ake was on loan at Bournemouth. Chelsea recalled him in January because we had some injuries to defensive players. And Ake didn't really play too much. And the relationship between Ake and the club was kind of severed from that point onwards. So I understand why there is such a hefty price tag on a player that is very, very talented. But from the player's point of view, I think he just wants to find a home and play regular football.
Yeah, and he's done nothing wrong to really be treated like this, has he, Trevor Chalobah? We'll keep an eye on that one. The Athletic is saying that Manchester City are considering a loan move for the midfielder Douglas Luiz. They're the current club that he plays for, Juventus, are pressing for an obligation to buy to be included in that proposed deal. When we heard about this, Flex, you sort of puffed out your cheeks and said, oh, no, you weren't very happy about
Manchester United to get involved for a loan move for Douglas Luiz, to be fair. Again, we talked about statement of intent for Manchester City to basically have high standards and say, we don't accept this position we're in. We're going to do something about it. And if they pulled that off, as well as the other three we spoke about at the top of the show, as additions in January, you'd have to take it after them and say, these are fantastic, strong moves. Douglas Luiz, you ask Aston Villa fans, we spoke to Dave Reed and Dan Bardell about the likes of Douglas Luiz and how, Aston Villa really didn't want to sell him in the summer. One of their top performers, if not the, and would be a fantastic asset to come back for any Premier League team, especially some much needed reinforcements in Manchester City's central midfield area. Mateus Cunha, Mateus, who they got from Wolves, Nunez hasn't really hit it off. Kovacic hasn't really hit it off, and obviously that big one for Rodri when he's out. So he would be a fantastic addition.
Maybe a good addition for a lot of clubs, actually. Let's talk about Arsenal now, because the Evening Standard say that Arsenal are going to make a shock move for Victor Osimhen. Not a name that's really propped up too much with Arsenal in terms of strikers, though it has done in the past. It's interesting, though, because is this potentially someone who might be slightly easier to prize away in January than, say, Benjamin Šeško or Victor Gyökeres?
Osimhen's made no bones about it and made no secret about his desire to eventually play in the Premier League. Grew up watching the league and is a big fan of a number of teams in this league. And like you said, it's probably easier to manoeuvre in terms of the deal. We know that his time at Napoli is done, currently on loan in Turkey at Galatasaray. But he's a player that Arsenal would have to change their style of play to accommodate. I think the other players we talk about when you're thinking about players that can lead the line for Arsenal can assimilate quite easily into this Arsenal starting 11. If you're to bring in a player like Osimhen, you are really changing your style of play. And to do that in January whilst you're trying to go for the league, I think that might be too much assimilation to do in a month where Arsenal do need to also reinforce in other positions. I understand the link because it makes sense. There's not too many strikers of his quality available in the market. But in terms of how he'd fit into this Arsenal starting 11, I don't quite see how it works.
Wages could also be a problem as well, and as to how that is structured too. So Arsenal, the general consensus is they do need a striker. Molly and Manny have picked out 3 other clubs who also need to be active this January.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Wolves to start with, I think, Manny, because they are in talks to sign Vitória SC midfielder Manu Silva. They've submitted a bid in the region of £10 million for him, but that's a midfielder. We've also identified another area where they need strengthening, and that's in defence, Manny.
Yeah, for sure. Wolves sold Kilman to West Ham, but obviously this season they've been leaking goals. Why is that? Is that because they've not replaced him? So is that the area they should be looking at? Obviously, they do have a few midfield injuries as well, but I think they're leaking goals, so they've got to focus on defence, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I've just been looking. They've conceded 48 goals in total this season. That's an average of 2.29 per match, and have only kept 3 clean sheets. So defence seems to be an area they need to strengthen. Let's move towards Everton then. That old story of a striker. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Manny, was brilliant yesterday against Spurs, but I think one goal, that won't be enough to give David Moyes peace of mind that they don't need a striker.
The thing is, I don't think it will. However, it's promising to see him come in and do that so soon after Moyes coming back in. So could he revitalise and help Calvert-Lewin find that form that he did have a few seasons ago? Obviously, it's been hamstring injuries that have been giving him problems, so hopefully he stays fit for them. But if not, they could be looking to strengthen and get another striker because Beto's not really hit the ground running.
Yeah, similarly, scored 5 goals in their previous 11 Premier League games, and then they went and scored 3 in 45 minutes yesterday. Things change quickly, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin definitely needing some help up front, you'd think. That was his first goal since September. Right, same old story for Bournemouth. A striker very much needed for them, Manny, do you think?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because obviously we saw what they went to Newcastle and did, and they were fantastic from like the first minute going. But they played Ouattara up front And if anything was to happen to him, do they have more reinforcements to get that position going again? They've got Now out, they've got Evan Nilsson out, so could they be looking to bring in a striker and reinforce that position? I think that should be where they go for.
Yeah, Unal and Evan Nilsson, massive misses for Bournemouth. They clearly need to strengthen. Having said that, what a game they had on the weekend. He is without a senior number 9, Andoni Iraola, so a target man up front, you'd think. To hold the ball and score those goals would be imperative. That said, Matt, we know that so many teams are after a striker this window, not least your team, Arsenal.
Yeah, you're right. They're hard to come by quality number 9, sadly. Now, coming up, we'll discuss Dele's move to Como and what the relegation-threatened teams in the Premier League need this month. We are taking you back 2 years to 2023. On this day, Arsenal signed Leandro Trossard from Brighton in a deal worth £27 million. Since then, he's made 76 appearances and he has scored 17 times. Last week, James Savundra caught up with him and he discussed the move.
So exactly 2 years since you joined this great football club, I want to take you back to the day. So exactly 2 years since you joined this great football club, I want to take you back to the day that you found out that you'd be joining Arsenal. What was going through your head at that point?
Yeah, what was going? Just really happiness. Obviously, I wasn't in the best spot at that moment with Brighton, but yeah, I was, especially when I heard it was Arsenal. Yeah, I was so eager to come here, especially when I spoke with the manager, and yeah, the position they were in, and also I knew what kind of football they played, so I know it would suit me really well, and yeah, up until this day, I'm really happy to be here.
And already at that point, you were a Belgium international, a well-known star in the Premier League. But moving to Arsenal, moving to a club of this size, does that change your life?
Oh yeah, obviously you'll be recognised a bit more on the streets, and yeah, in that kind of terms, yeah, maybe. But in general, I just enjoy my football, and obviously it's really nice to, yeah, as I said, I live for those games, those big games, and people will look more at a game again, for example, between Arsenal and Man U than others. But I'm just really happy to be here. It's such a big club, and hopefully I can be part of this club to achieve trophies.
Right, we're going to focus now on the bottom three. What do they need? Can they get out of this predicament? Flex, you're going to start us off with Leicester, who almost have the same back four that actually was relegated to the Championship, but they also need to score some goals as well. Plus, they're limited by their finances. It's mainly loans that they're looking at. Where do you start?
It's really, really difficult. Ruud van Nistelrooy's got a massive job on his hands, and if you look at some of the statistics, they're conceding more, they're scoring less, they're struggling to put a run of form together. And in some games, they have been creating chances. It's not like they've played really, really poorly throughout 90 minutes of all of these games that they're losing. There's a heavy reliance on Jamie Vardy, and at his age, you know, he's drinking energy drinks at half-time to get himself going, which is a fantastic striker.
Surprised he's only having one.
Exactly. So a really big pressure on his shoulders because the quality isn't really there. You're looking at another winger as well, potentially, a big injury to Fatawa as well, so that's not the best. And of course, defenders, another centre-half, potentially. Conor Cody not getting a look in as well, and he's an experienced player at this level, so big changes needed, but very, very difficult to do them in January. And when the morale is so low at Leicester and the performances aren't getting potentially what they deserve, it's a difficult place to be in. But I'd say definitely a striker, a winger and a defender.
Okay. How about Ipswich, Kwaku? Because we heard at the beginning of the window that they were looking at potentially bringing in up to 5 signings. They've got Philogene through the door, they've got Godfrey through the door. But do you expect them to be the most active of the bottom 3 in these final few days of the window?
Yes, because if you assess Ipswich squads at the beginning of the season, even now, it's the lack of Premier League experience that really, really shines through. Obviously, back-to-back promotions means that they will have that lack of experience. They were playing in League One a couple of years ago. If you look at Ipswich this season, they've only scored 20 league goals. 8 of those goals have been from Liam Delap. They're over-reliant on a striker that's been very good this season. Scored 40% of their league goals. And so finding more firepower to supplement what he gives them. And also in midfield, Kayuste, who's on loan from Napoli, is a very good player, but he does blow hot and cold. So bring somebody who's solid in that midfield to provide cover for the centre-backs is definitely a huge, huge area of improvement for Ipswich. And Kieran McKenna's talked about it as well. He's talked about how they need to improve, and I expect them to do a lot of business between now and the end of the window.
Molly, what about Southampton? Because 11 points off safety. How do they approach these final 2 weeks? Do they go all out, try and get a couple of players who can keep them in the division? Or is it about saying, OK, we might be in the Championship next year, let's sign some younger players for that?
Yeah, they might be in the Championship next season, but if I was a Southampton fan, I would want to see some ambition from the club and actually show some promise, whether that be damage limitation and getting a few defenders. I think defensively is where they need to strengthen, really. Yes, of course, scoring goals would be amazing, but the way that Ivan Juric likes to play is defensive safety a priority for him, whereas obviously Russell Martin before him was more about that expansive football and scoring goals. So I think they need to prioritise defence. They've only kept 2 clean sheets this season so far, scoring on average 2.27 goals per match. That's not good enough if you want to stay in the Premier League. So clearly defence feels like a priority for me. But as I say, if I was a fan, I would want to see some promise from my club to think, yeah, OK, they are fighting here. Yeah. And as well for the morale of the players who are still playing at the club. They want to make sure that they are defending their goals just as much as they possibly can.
Not looking great for Southampton at the moment. Let's finish with a slightly more positive story, shall we? Because Dele is back. He has signed for Como on an 18-month deal after a successful trial. Manny, listen, it's good to see him back, isn't it? But do you feel like this is actually not a bad place for him to revive his career? Small club, but they're in Serie A.
I think it's even the best place for him to go because less pressure. We all know the quality that Dele has had since he's been in the Premier League and since he's been playing at a high level. But it's more trying to recapture that and show that he can do that. And there's also, he sets a reminder on his phone every day, 11 a.m, World Cup 2026. And what a better way to do that than go back, play, get your confidence going and enjoy your time out there.
That's a good sign, though, isn't it? Because it shows the drive is still there for him. He's 28 years old, but he feels like he's still got a lot to give.
Yeah, I think he's got plenty to give, to be honest. 28 still got, that's pretty much going to be his prime as well. So now is the time to try and recapture that form, get your confidence going, and like I said, enjoy your football. So that's the perfect place, in my opinion.
I think Como would be the perfect place for me if I was a footballer. I'd definitely sign.
It's not a bad place to live.
It's not bad, is it? Guys, thank you very much. Pleasure, as always. Thanks, Molly. Thanks to Manny. Thanks to Kwaku and to Flex as well. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m, for Good Morning Transfers. But we're not done today. We're back at 1 p.m. Transfer Talk. European expert Kevin Hatchard is with us to discuss all the big stories across the divisions. And you can get a full roundup of the day's news with the Transfer Show tonight, 5 and 7 p.m. I'm a chef alongside Michael Bridge for that. Coming up, though, it is the Football Show with an extended edition of Ref Watch.